Hi, it's Martin from Robson Laidler. Just thought we'd talk a little bit about the way that the grant for the self-employed is going to work, and in particular, whether it's possible to artificially inflate your claim. Now, first of all, I will say that this isn't a policy that we endorse at Robson Laidler. We're not encouraging people to inflate their claims, far from it. In fact, the whole spirit of the grant is set out quite fairly. It's averaged over 3 years, and the purpose of that 3-year average is presumably to give people a fair crack at a reasonable level of earnings. So if had a couple of good years and a bad year, it's averaged out. That said, one of the things that is theoretically available is the ability to amend your 18-19 tax return. If you amend your 18-19 tax return to increase your profits, you increase the variables that go into the calculation and can, in theory, increase the amount of grant that you'll get. Now, you only really have two options on this. The first one is you disclaim actual costs. So let's say in the year 18-19, you've spent £9,000 on, well, it doesn't matter, rent. You might say, well, if I disclaim that, my profits will go up £9,000. And that is true, and that is the case. The important thing to note about expenses such as rent or marketing or any other type of revenue expense that is deducted in year is that you cannot then have them anywhere else. So what you can't do is just say, well, we'll disallow the rent in 18-19 and claim twice as much in 19-20. So it's important to note that once you disclaim any cost, you lose it. And of course, there's a debate about whether you can actually disclaim a cost anyway. It was a cost, it really existed. You have to declare the proper profit for the year. But let's just look at the numbers. Would you want to do this anyway? So let's say we've disallowed £9,000 of cost. That increases your average across 3 years by £3,000 a year. That's why I picked 9. It's a nice simple number to divide by 3. So in theory, your profits go by an average of £3,000 a year, on which you will get a grant of 80% of that increase. So you'll get an additional £2,400, assuming HMRC will allow you to amend that return, and assuming they don't think you're playing a game here and penalise you in some way. But £2,400. If you're a base rate taxpayer who pays national insurance on your self-employed income, which most will, remember, this is going to be your main source of income. It's going to be where you get more than half of your income from, but it's not allowed to exceed £50,000. So it's a reasonable assumption that this is working age people who will pay tax and national insurance, 20% for tax and 9% for national insurance accordingly. If you look at 29% of £9,000, and then you remember that this tax was, of course, due, some of it over a year ago in January 19, some of it in July 19, and then the balance, if any, was due in January just gone. So you're going to pay a mix of surcharges and interest on this. If you put a reasonable estimate in for them, what you've got is a bill of about £2,800 as an increase in your 18-19 tax bill. So what we've achieved is an increase in your grant of £2,400 at a cost of about £2,800. Now, of course, if you don't pay national insurance, that changes, but most people will be paying national insurance here. So as you can see, fortunately, the whole morality of whether you should or shouldn't do this is taken out of your hands because it's simply not worth it. It's not worth amending your 18-19 return for something like an artificial increase in profits by reducing your expenses. Where it gets a little bit more of an interesting debate is something like capital allowances. Now, capital allowances are an expense where you actually are allowed to decide when and where you claim them. Now, if that £9,000 we were talking about was on the purchase of a van, for instance, you would have been able to decide when doing your 18-19 return whether you wanted to claim the full £9,000, part of the £9,000, or none of the £9,000 at the point of doing the return. You can also, in a normal year, in a normal circumstance, go back and amend your decision on that. So you could quite validly go back and amend your 18-19 return to disallow that claim. Because it's capital allowances, you don't lose it. It would be sent into the next and following years. Now, the key thing to remember here is the way capital allowances work is you either get them as 100% allowance in year one, or you get a proportion of the spend spread across perhaps up to 15 years if you don't claim it all in the first year. So whilst you will still get the same benefit from it, it will be spread over many, many years. But if you look at the maths, the increase will still be the £2,800 or so in tax, surcharge and interest. You will only get £2,400 as an increase on the grant if HMRC allow you to amend the return, that is, and I don't see why they would. But the difference here, because it's capital allowances, in theory, you will get £2,600 or so relieved over the coming 15 years. So if anything, it's a very long game. And obviously, it's against the spirit of the grant. We know that. And if HMRC have actually got any sense on this, what they would have done is they would have pulled a snapshot of people's incomes on the date this was announced. And Rishi Sunak gave people, I think it was 4 weeks to get their 19 returns in if they haven't already done their returns. That date is almost upon us, if not already past us. I'll check that and put it in the comments. So what we've got here is a position where theoretically, if it's capital allowances, you might be able to do something that mathematically works eventually. But for anyone else, it really isn't worth it. You will definitely lose more than you will get in increased grant. Now, of course, if you haven't already done your 19 return, you're possibly thinking about all of the same things that I've just said. And of course, because you haven't submitted a return, you can just submit it the first time the best way. And it might be worth disclaiming capital allowances, so long as you don't go across the £50,000 threshold, of course. What I mean by that is if you've got £40,000 worth of taxable profit and you spend £20,000 on a van, if you just claim that, you'll go to 60. That 60 will then be over the threshold and you will not then get a grant. So you have to be very careful on this. So that's Martin from Robson Nadler talking about the self-employed grant. Hope you found that useful.